Good morning, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Good morning. Yeah, let us know where you're coming in from. France, amazing. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Hey, Jessica. Tara, Elaine. Amazing. And a few people who are new to Notion office hours. Hey, Edgar, great to see you. Amazing. So if you haven't attended an office hours before, these are pretty casual sessions and they're kind of guided by your questions. So if you have something specific that you want to ask, definitely use the ask a question area below. I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat window. Also, let me know what you're already using for your task management, if you are already using another tool. Hey, April. Amazing. Welcome. So I'm going to be sharing some of my own personal task management philosophies and sort of how I've been using Notion to manage my tasks. But if you've been using Notion for any amount of time, you probably know that there's a million and one different ways that you can do anything in Notion, really. So these are kind of based on my own philosophies and just experience doing consulting through Notion. Is it possible to turn the chat window off? I believe you can, on the top right, if you hover, you should be able to minimize that chat window. Awesome. Let me know if that works for you. I know the chat can be a little bit distracting. Awesome. So a lot of different tools here, Todoist, Tick. Awesome. Has anyone tried doing their task management inside of Notion yet? It's a whole new world. Cool. We've got surprisingly quite a few number of advanced people here, which is interesting. Used to do task management in Notion. I'm curious, Skylar, why did you switch? I know it can be pretty overwhelming when you're just getting started. Heck, even when you've been using it for a while, it can be pretty overwhelming. 50-50, it's a nightmare. Yeah, I definitely went through that process of kind of having part of my tasks living in some task management, and then so much other stuff was living in Notion that I was really feeling spread across a couple different platforms. Awesome. Cool. So what we're going to do is, as any questions or any resources come up to you, like, don't hesitate to share that in the sidebar. What I'm going to do is update that resource document as we go. So if anything gets mentioned or there's any specific things that I touch upon that you want to refer to later, I'm going to add them to that resource document as we go. So hopefully we can cover those and you can reference them later. So I'm going to go through, give you a brief little bit of a tour of kind of how I've been using it. Again, this is just based on my own personal experience and philosophies. I do work with clients. I do deliver online courses. So for some of you that might be doing your own course development, Notion has been really amazing for that. Trying to get out of Evernote. Yeah. So the one big difference, and I've sort of said this before, is that I feel like my information is more accessible and visible in Notion compared to how it was in Evernote. I would always kind of save things for a rainy day just in case with Evernote. And I never really had a proper way to surface that information again. I would set myself a reminder to, go through your Evernote notes and document. And it was way too easy to put that off. But I feel like it's a lot easier to kind of connect to your ideas and your to-dos together inside of Notion. So I'm going to show you how I do that. Awesome. Couple questions have popped in. Just going to read through. Yeah, a lot of people here using the para method. I'm going to go over that definitely in my setup. And we'll definitely be sharing some templates with you. Chris asked how I manage email, considering that you can't forward emails to Notion. I'm still stuck with OmniFocus. That's a great question. I've tried to get into the habit of, as soon as a client sends me an email, if there's any attachments, drag those into Notion, into their project, and copy any relevant information and then archive the email. It's a little bit more manual, but it just means that I'm really translating everything that comes through email into an actionable to-do item. And over time, I've been able to train a good chunk of my clients to use Notion to put their tasks in there as well and assign it to me. So it takes a bit of time to get your clients up to speed there, but it has significantly reduced email. Working with a team and sharing Notion pages has been great, but I want to switch my team to Notion. Yeah, and Rob, I'm not sure if you found this, but something I've noticed is it almost takes one person on the team to sort of be the ambassador and to get the space pretty close to ready before bringing on other team members. Because if you try and bring in your team members into the blank canvas that is Notion, people get pretty overwhelmed and they're like, no, 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 we don't need a new tool. What is this? And it can be a little bit overwhelming. So you may have experienced that yourself. Okay, Nicole. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour here, and I'm going to check the chat. So if there's anything that you're looking at and you're like, wait, what's going on there? How does she do that? I'm happy to elaborate on that. There is a lot of personal information in here too. That's probably the hardest part of doing these screen shares, is that there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's not always easy to hide all of that, but you get to see how things work behind the scenes. So we have made some pretty big changes to our Notion setup kind of as the year wrapped up. So we use Notion to manage pretty much everything inside of our business and household. I run Okie Dokie with my husband, Ben. So this is pretty much everything that we need shared here, and all of our household stuff is here. What used to happen, if you've looked at some of my old setups, you might have seen I had like projects, areas, resources, archives. Okie Dokie is essentially areas. It's just named Okie Dokie. That's easier for both of us to remember. So this is a slightly adapted version of the Para setup. Also, another thing that used to happen was, Okie Dokie was basically my space with also our shared stuff. And what we realized, or what we needed to do, was separate all the stuff that was private to us. So my personal planning, my goal setting, my dashboard needs to live in my private space, and Ben's lives in his private space. So now we actually don't see all of these amazing things that we each have separately. So what I have now is my own private dashboard. It's kind of like my Start Here page, and I have my sort of mini Para inside of this. So these are all my sort of active projects and clients, areas, resources, and I can also kind of open up and see what's on deck. And this is how I handle my tasks. But truth be told, most of my task management happens inside my weekly agenda. So I can go into that in a little bit more detail. You'll also notice that in our workspace here, we've got a sprint. And a sprint is basically a grouping of our master tasks. So maybe I'll jump into our sprint so you can kind of see what this looks like. So they tend to be 2-week sprints. I think over the Christmas break, we did 3-week sprints. And if I open this up, you can see here's the grouping of all of the tasks that are related to that sprint. And when we're actually doing our planning, we sort of have a bit of an overview here. We've got time estimates for how we do our tasks, and we can see these by person. We can look at the backlog, what didn't get shipped, and we can kind of reassess. I'm just going to keep an eye on the sidebar here. How do you streamline properties that are displayed on a page that's called from a related database, but that not all properties are necessarily to be visible? Oh, I got you, Edgar. Yeah, so that is something to be aware of. Okay, so you'll notice if I go to my actions here, there's a ton of different properties in any one of these. So if I open this up, I don't fill out all of those properties. And in fact, we actually, I don't think this would necessarily work with a team, but because Ben's my husband and we share a lot of this information, we actually link our task databases to our personal agendas. And so we each kind of do that. So Ben can link certain tasks to his key results database. You'll notice that I can't see that because that's private to Ben, so I'm not able to see that. I can pull in from my journal here and I can add items there. I don't fill out all of this information. I know some people find it annoying to kind of have all of these properties here, even though you may not use them all the time. Something I've asked Notion for, and I would really love to be able to do, is just kind of have a toggle where I could minimize all of that information so I don't have to see it. You'll also notice there's a ton of different templates here for my tasks. So anything that you do over and over again, I highly recommend making a template for it. So for example, because I work with a couple of clients here and I always have tasks that are going to be related to that project, I make templates for those. And all that means is usually it's setting up a specific icon. Maybe it's relating it to a specific project. So I might have one for home projects, or like here, Marie OS. And I can give that a default day of today. So almost all of my tasks, I give a default of today. And then we have some things to calculate priority matrix based on status and impact and effort. And so anything that you do over and over again, this kind of helps get around Notion's lack of quick add. I know a lot of to-do list and to-do apps, you can capture your to-dos a lot quicker. And so that's one way that I've gotten around that, is that I can kind of quickly add those tasks. I can also view this information in so many different ways. So I can see by impact, by day. And this is the one that I tend to default to. And really, I do most of my task management inside of my weekly agenda, which I can jump into to show you what that looks like. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people are also very interested in wanting to minimize that information that shows up in database entries, because those database entries can get pretty big. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick peek at the questions here. Is there a way to have a daily journal entry in a database and also include a way to add 3 things I'm grateful for every day and have those 3 things be added to a gratitude database or combine it into the journal database? I want a way to compile and view all the things and be able to sort by month or year. So that's a great question, Mike. There's a couple different ways you can do that. I'll have to be, again, a little bit careful here because I don't know how much I'm actually sharing. So I've got my visual journal here, and I can also share this as progress. Okay, so just a second here. So here's all the wonderful things that I'm tracking. So I think this is a good example. So for example, I try to set the highlight of the day. That is like the most important task or the most important next action or creative thing that I could do in my business. Now, I used to do that as text, but what I'm experimenting with is actually doing that as a link to my master task database so that I can pull from that. And there's no reason why you couldn't do that with your gratitude. So if you wanted to almost create a gratitude database, then you could create a gratitude database and pull from that and easily kind of add new ones as you go. So that might be one way of planning that. And yeah, I can scroll down and kind of see all of the things I was grateful for, and wins and losses, things I struggled with. I can see all of that in one go. And I do this for my agenda too on a weekly basis. So, what can I do better? What am I grateful for? What were some of the wins and celebrations? And then when I do my sort of monthly reviews, weekly reviews, I can just go back and scroll through all those and be like, oh yeah, that was an awesome week. And I can go in and do that. Also helped me write my, year in review post a lot quicker. Jessica asked, oh my God, Marie, all those things on fire, doesn't that get bananas? Bananas in which way? I know that it means that I really need to get on those things. It just means they're most important. I guess I didn't really think of it as literally being on fire, but it was more that this is a really important next thing that needs to get done. And I think that's, again, the beauty that everyone's brain works so differently, and we all need different ways of seeing information. I know, a good friend of mine likes to see things based on effort and even project. So, just show me all of my tasks per project. That's another way that you can do it. Maybe the fire emojis are very stressful for some people, and you might not want to do that. You could change that to something different. But essentially, this priority matrix is adjusted based on whether this is high or low effort. So if it's low impact, we've got this sort of like sleepy coffee kind of chill vibe. But if it's high impact and the effort is going to take a bit, we know that that's like that's sort of an intense task that's going to take a bit of energy, but it's also really important. And yeah, that's how we've been handling that. And you can see for this particular task, for example, it's linked to a project. It's linked to certain sprints. That means it's been in my list for at least 2 sprints. I can see which week I assigned that as the most important thing. And then any details that go along with that task would go in the body of the task. So yeah, I guess it's meant to be a little stressful. Warning, this needs to get done ASAP. Having a gratitude database. And also on the gratitude database thing too, you could also do that with like things that you want to improve each week. And so you can over time develop a thing that kind of shows you a list of everything needs to be done stat, as you can see. Um, is there a way to get tasks sorted automatically with regards to today, tomorrow using date? Not in this particular view. So, I mean, for example, let's create a new view of tasks, or let me show you the different ways that you can kind of manipulate your information. So I'm going to choose to duplicate. Well, actually, I didn't. I just did board. Right. So on deck, I can choose to group this by any number of ways. I find grouping by the day the most helpful for me personally. But if I just want to organize this by date, okay, let me duplicate this, and then I'm just going to make a table. And then I can, hide anything that's not super relevant. And then I can sort this by, date ascending or descending. I can hide that because I already know that that's already filtered by my name. Even this I don't find super helpful in this view. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you can manipulate this information. I could also create views for each client. So I could say, just show me all of the tasks in, sorted by date that relate to this project. And that's, again, there's so many different ways you can view this information. Another thing you can do is jump into projects. And so for each project, we try to have one next action. So if I turn this on, I should be able to turn on my tasks. There, so you can kind of see like the next most important tasks show up here. And then I also embed my task database inside of the project and refine it by that project. So here's one that I only just started. Create Marie OS. So what I can do is create a linked database and pull in my actions database. And then I can filter this. Say project contains Marie OS. And there's no next actions there, so that's going to be empty. And I'll also do is say the status is not complete. So it does take a bit of time to set this up initially, but once you have some project templates in place, I can make it so that actions database is always ready to go whenever I spin up a new project, and that I just need to update that filter. And same with the tasks. The more that you do these sort of recurring and similar tasks over and over again, you can kind of pre-populate a bunch of those properties to make it really easy to quick add. I can also then add, random thoughts here. I can type a bunch of things and say like, okay, I know that I need to do this thing here. That's a task. And I can drag that in there and that becomes a task. So there's this flexibility of being able to quick add, but then also kind of formalize things and assign them different properties, assign them to yourselves, etc. So I hope that answers your question about being able to sort. And just to clarify again, with the Kanban view, so these are properties I've assigned it. So there's nothing like inherent about a date of today. So if you want things in a Kanban view, that relies on you using a dropdown, a multi-select or a single select, and that's how you can organize your Kanban. So again, I can group that by status if I want. I can group it by effort. But it takes a bit of time to figure out what makes you the most effective and kind of how is it that you're going to be able to process this information. Because again, we all work a little bit differently and it's important to recognize that. For example, it might not be helpful for you to see that the 5-alarm fire, like maybe that's stressful for you. So maybe it's not helpful for you to have those emojis in there. That's totally fine. But it might be more helpful for you to see the effort that it's going to be required to do some of those tasks, or even like the effort and impact. Lots of different ways that you can organize this information. I think the key though is minimizing the amount of work you have in progress. I also think the biggest mistake people make, I still am guilty of this, is not making a task a project. So sometimes we make a task and it's actually a project. It's not really just one task. It's probably made up of 5 or 10 different tasks. So even like send email newsletter, that could be a project. There's probably a lot of moving parts as part of that email newsletter. So same with create systems documentation. I know there's actually quite a few moving pieces there. So just be mindful, I guess, of how, of not making tasks that are actually quite substantial in size, and that if you notice that they keep sitting on your list, week after week, it might be worth revisiting. One of the biggest points of confusion with Notion is relational databases. I understand the basic concept, but when I apply it to Para, I easily get confused. How do relations work between areas, projects, and tasks? Great question, Chris, because also I made a big change recently. Oh, hey, Ben from Notion is here. Okay, so one of the changes I made recently is I used to have areas was a big database, and I would connect all of my projects to that area. But I realized that each of these areas needs to have different properties and different information. I'm not tracking the same information across all of these different things. Like what I need to track in houseplants, like houseplants is a database. I don't need to track a whole bunch of stuff like projects and dates and all that stuff. So really, projects need, almost all of my projects will have a couple key pieces of information. What is the outcome of this project? When does it start? When does it end? What are the next actions that I need to do? What are any resources that go along with that? I find projects are very actionable, but areas are things that don't change very often. So and also, again, most of these are their own databases, and it didn't make sense for me to have like databases inside of databases inside of databases, even though I still do embed databases inside of other pages. But a lot of these made sense to have as their own pages. So for example, profit first planning might have notes at the top and then a database below and then an expenses. So I can kind of embed databases inside of other pages. I don't need to track all of the same information inside of here. So this is a kind of recent change. I actually started with areas being a collection of loose pages. Then I moved everything into databases and I tried to streamline everything into databases, but it didn't make sense. I think it was overkill. So I actually went back to this model. So this allows way more flexibility for my areas. Like marketing is an area, but so are like my editorial is an area of my business as well. So I find this method gives me a lot more flexibility. And then what I can do as well is embed any projects or any tasks related to my editorial calendar inside of that page. So I don't worry too much about relational databases with areas. I mostly do it with projects. So let me open up a project here. So like bedroom flooring, for example, this is a project that we're working on. It's active. So, these are the standard properties that I have as part of our projects. Who owns it? We're collaborating on this. The status is active. That we've got a couple of different statuses here. Type is home. So I've got a couple of different categories, and that allows me to see my projects in a Kanban view, which I really like. The date, any related tasks, and we can see which ones are done if we click on those quickly. That's a roll-up that shows the number of active tasks, resources. So that's going to pull from my notes database. Calendar is my editorial calendar. Don't necessarily need that for this project. So a lot of these we won't actually use, but you'll see that area is actually just text. So what I could do is I could say home, and I can mention home and garden. Right. And so then I can one click there if I want to, but it doesn't I don't need to force a relation to the database, if that makes sense. So if some of you are not totally familiar yet with relational databases, anywhere that you see this arrow here means that is pulling from a database entry, whereas these are just text-based entries. And again, I could mention as many different areas as I want to, marketing, or studies, whatever. I can mention any item in there. which gives me a lot more flexibility than when I'm just pulling it from a database. So yeah, as you can see, I can throw a bunch of notes in here. I've got our actions that are filtered by that project. And so really the projects become these little containers of all the action that needs to happen for that particular project. Hope that helps clarify that, Chris. Yeah, and Omar makes a good point, is that tasks aren't strictly part of the para system, but tasks can kind of encompass all of it. So there can be tasks related to my projects, related to areas, even related to resources. So for example, when I am saving things to my resources database, I will often set a task for myself, or even a reminder that just says, hey, on Saturday, review this article, or batch review the last 10 articles that came in. So hope that makes sense. I'm just checking through some of these questions. That's so interesting, Tyler. So Tyler says, Notion's so close to being a great project and task manager, but still feels restricted and forced. I'm really curious. I'm curious why you think that, because I've tended to think the opposite, where it's almost so open-ended that you kind of have to force some boundaries on it and give it some structure. And so I haven't even touched upon really kind of managing external clients just yet, but we can get into that. So the linked database in the projects template, you still have to select the filter properties manually. Yes, yep, you do have to. You set the properties once, and once they're set, those properties apply to any new items that you add to the task. Can you go through the process of changing tasks into project? Yeah, that's a great, actually, that's a great, great call. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, I say, send email newsletter is actually, this feels like a more substantial thing. This is just, we're just gonna mess around with this. I'm gonna move to projects. I'm actually just directly moving that to my projects database. So when I go here, and that may not have a category, so I might have to, search for that now. Email. Let's just go to master, all projects. And I will sort this by, actually, I don't think I have a date added. There we go, send email newsletter. So I've just basically tossed this into my projects. And so there's no properties here other than it's assigned to me day of today. So that's still retained from the task. And then let's say this is a project here. You'll see that was a template. So now the actions database is already ready to go. Client portal is already ready to go. And then I just have to go through and assign these different properties to it. Okie dokie. That's going to be my project. Status is active. And then I know that there's going to be a number of different tasks related to that. So I can add them right here. So like review. I know that I need to review the accelerator modules on writing email. I need to draft the first email in ConvertKit. And so you'll see that those are just being added as, quick add items, but I can also click inside of that and make sure that I'm assigning myself something, give it a template. I'll say that's an okie dokie task. Status is in progress. Impact is high. Effort is low. Go send email newsletter. Okay, so that is also, area is, actually, no, we're not going to use the area. Yeah, status. Okay, we have an area here that's a drop down. Okay, so I'm going to make that, that's business. And that way, when I go back to my projects, that should show up under business. Or did I not do that properly? Oh, here we go. Send email newsletter. Oh, I have that as client. Okay. Type is business. So you'll see some of the properties from type and area were different between tasks and projects. It's not often that I have moved a task directly into a project. Often I would usually just make a new project. So if I make one here, it's going to be personal because it's already in this category here. So I would probably do that. But just wanted to show you how you could actually move something between two major databases if you wanted to. And so now I've broken this up into smaller tasks and it's a bit more of a bite-sized thing. And I can also, again, give myself a date and say, I know that's not a one-day thing. That's probably going to take me a couple of days to get this sorted out. And then let's set a reminder on the day of the event as well. So that's how I would do that. Okay, I get a lot of questions about archiving tasks, so this is really good. Do you ever archive your tasks? If so, how do you go about doing that? Choosing what gets archived? How do you physically move it? Do you just dump everything in one archive? Sort of, yes. Okay, let me see. Okay. So we do have a tasks archive that is basically a duplication of our task database. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. Because at the end of the year, we basically started a brand new task database and pretty much moved everything into the task archive here. There are a couple of different ways that you might want to do this because you might want to store, for example, those archive tasks inside of these areas. Like we could, for example, put the archive database in here, or I could even go into the archive database, refine by everything that is household, and I could highlight everything, Command-Shift-P, move that into this household project to kind of make sure that it's retained with the relevant project. It really depends. I don't often look back at my archive tasks once they're complete. So I think it really depends on whether you're doing this for business, whether you're doing it for personal, how much data that you want to retain with those tasks. Like when I archive a task, do I need all the properties that go along with it? Like, do I need to know all of that stuff? Maybe you do. It really depends, again, on the type of tasks. But to me, retaining all of this information doesn't really help me. It doesn't really make sense. So I might even select a bunch of tasks and just move them into that project database, and they would just be pages. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. I think as a quarterly habit, that would be something that I would do, would be to look at all the tasks that have been marked as complete and Command-Shift-P, move those into our archive database that lives here. And we might create a task archive for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and just kind of batch everything and move it into there. So that way the metadata is retained. So that's one way that we've been doing that. Same thing with projects. If they've been kind of in the archive for more than 6 months, a year, we would just move those into the project archive. What's nice about that too is if you moved a project into the archive and it was just a page, and it kind of loses all that data, if you move it back into your active projects, that data is still retained. So you can kind of refer to it again. Yeah, a lot of people ask about the archives. I hope that helps clarify. I think I'll probably do a video that's all around archiving and task management there. I take it you do not manage all of your projects based on area. No, I don't really manage my projects based on area. Area to me is like just a container categories. So there's lots of areas of my business that don't have a project necessarily, but they are still areas of my life that I might need to reference something. I might need to store a note or save something for future reference. Bookkeeping is kind of like an ongoing recurring thing that we do. We don't even put that in our, like, it's just kind of baked in. We have a Google Calendar. We know, when that needs to get done. So we don't have a project for bookkeeping necessarily, but we do have a task that we do every 2 weeks. We sit down and we do that. And we take notes and reconcile all the accounts. And that's a database that only really needs to live there. So that's kind of how I think of areas. They're just really categories of our life and business. And some of them have projects, some of them don't. Yeah, +1 on forcing boundaries in Notion. Yeah, and that really is the problem, is like you can literally do almost anything inside of Notion, so you do need to put structure, and you need to kind of decide what that's going to look like. And I think that's really the only way that Notion can be as powerful is it's just a tool, and you need to kind of apply and layer your systems into it to make it work for you. So again, a lot of my client workspaces look very different, very different. I do use Para as like a general catch-all structure to help them get organized. But again, the way people need to think of their tasks, and I work with a lot of clients that have multiple pieces of their business, and so not everybody's dashboards and task management looks the same. And I think that's pretty normal. If you've ever found like frustrated by your system and saying like, someone recommends I should do this, but it's just not working for me, there might be a better system that makes more sense for the way that you process information. And I think you only know that as you practice and you work through this. So my setup looks quite different than it used to even 6 months ago. Even this idea of sprints has been super helpful because what it's done is it has kind of forced Ben and I to come together and say, here's what I'm committing to in the next 2 weeks. He's saying, here's what he's committing to. And then he can say, hey, based on all the time and the numbers, it looks like that's a really crazy week for you. Is that realistic? And we can actually talk it through. So it's kind of helpful if you have someone else that you can run that by. Okay, I'm going to check in on the questions here. Okay, so I did sort of answer the how do you back up your workspaces? Do you ever try recovery? No recovery at all if your mail account is gone. I know somebody posted a link there about that. Yeah, I mean, I do back it up as the HTML format. It's not exactly the best format, but I suppose my philosophy is like even though so much of my life lives inside of Notion, if it burned to the ground and didn't exist anymore, yeah, I would start from scratch. I would have to. I have my most important projects and things exported. All of the files and assets that go along with those projects also live elsewhere. I'm not putting every single file in Notion and not having it live elsewhere. So I still use Dropbox for all of that customer data, images. Like I work with a lot of big Photoshop files, videos, whatever. So that still lives in Dropbox. And then I'm also linking those inside of Notion as well. So, and those also live on my hard drive as well. So never have one point of failure. But really, yeah, again, if Notion didn't exist anymore, I would have to find a new system, just like with anything else. I think that's kind of a risk that you take when you're working with these digital systems is, yeah, things can change on a dime, and don't have all of your information living in one place. So yeah, you can export your data in a couple different formats. Hopefully over time, Notion will make some of those export formats a little bit more flexible. But yeah, I try not to design it so that if they disappeared, I would be completely hosed. Okay. Go back to my default view that I like. I like to see those fire alarms there. Okay. Edgar was asking about crushing versus tracking, wanting to turn into a crushing machine. I'm assuming this is referring to kind of your goal setting, right? Yeah, and some of you might have seen the planning templates that I use. So I have my goals and projects here. So like, my Marie HQ is basically all the things that are personally related to me, all my next actions, my projects and goals. And I can view these goals in a number of different ways. I can see my progress relating to them. Like, let's look this up. Become a rule number 1 investor, and then I have a results database. So this is linked to my results database, and then those results are linked to a goal and related to a project as well as a next action. So I mean, it's really just doing a work back schedule of like, what is it that I want to achieve? What's it going to take to do it? What's realistic in terms of timing? And what are the key results and actions as part of that? So that template is available, Edgar. I don't know if that's helpful, but I think the key is that whatever your bigger goals are, that you have created projects that support those goals. Otherwise, they're probably not going to happen. But if they're visible and they're in my face, and I've created projects that support them, and I have next actions that are in my calendar, I'm a lot more likely to make that happen. And again, some of these I build out in way more detail than others. Not all of them. Some of them I don't actually have too much data in there. Others I have a lot of notes and things like that. So I hope that helps. Hope that helps clarify. I feel like we could do a whole session that's just on, goal setting and planning and all that stuff. So, but yeah, if you want a copy of that, those planning templates, those are available, and I can reference them and link to them in the resource document. Rachel asks, would you consider selling one-on-one trainings or workshops? I do sell one-on-one trainings and workshops, Rachel. Since August, really the first time that I did my first Notion webinar, my inbox has exploded, and I do work with a lot of teams now. I used to do much more of helping people with the automation and customer journey and launching and operations and kind of hooking up all of their different integrations and stuff like that. But now it's kind of moved a little bit more behind the scenes, so helping people get organized so that they can deliver on their projects. So it's kind of similar work, but it's just more behind the scenes stuff. I do also have a course called Notion Mastery if you are interested in that. It's a little bit more geared at the solo entrepreneurs who want to manage their own time and their business together. So I'm happy to include the link in that if that's interesting to you. Because yeah, I do think that the task management side of Notion, especially within a team, is one of the trickiest things to master. And it's so beautiful once you have mastered it. It really is awesome, but it is a time commitment to kind of get things up to speed. So I try as much as possible to create templates based on the most common use cases that I'm hearing. And I know that planning was very timely for people and that sort of thing. So there's definitely some resources that I want to create to help make it easier for teams to get up and running a lot more quickly. Okay. So Sandra also asked, how do you combine your planning the year template? I think that's this one here with Para. And so essentially, my Marie HQ has a planning area. And so my goals are here, my yearly, quarterly, that's basically all of the databases that you would have seen in that planning template. And they're all one click away. And then I've also like re-embedded them. So my journal is here, but it's also embedded here. And this is kind of like a start here page. So I create a new journal entry. I pre-populate that highlight. Now you'll see that I've tried to, instead of, my highlight used to just be like the word or the thing, but now I'm trying to be more action oriented. So I'm just going to hide this. So now the highlight is like, I need to get that Notion office hours follow-up ready to go after the event. That is the most important thing I need to get done today. And so thinking more toward these being actionable has been really helpful. All of my actions that are on deck, my weekly agenda, as well as the next actions. And yeah, so that's really the planning is kind of, it sits in here under Marie HQ, because all of that planning is basically my planning. It's my goal setting and my stuff. So it didn't really make sense to have that living under the okie dokie areas. So that's kind of how it integrates. Is I just see planning as like an area of my business and my life. And obviously my business and life are pretty intertwined. So I don't actually, separate this stuff out by business and life, really. I hope that helps clarify. Can you touch on tagging actions or tasks to projects or added context? Clean Office is an office project that includes tasks such as sweep floors. I'm not sure if I follow what you're asking, Tyler, or if I might have already answered this, but I could either create a bunch of those tasks right inside of that project if I wanted to, or I could create them as separate tasks. There's, again, a couple different ways I could do this by area, so like household stuff, I could add a bunch of actions here. And again, if I know I'm creating the same actions over and over again, I would probably have like a household task, and I would say, you know, sweep floors. Okay, so I did. It sounds like I did cover your question there. Let's sweep the floors, and then that's like a personal task, and I can add more properties quickly. That's how I would do that. Okay, awesome. How do you handle recurring tasks? I love that you asked that because I hear this all the time. Oh, I wish I could use Notion, but they don't handle recurring tasks. So I guess we're screwed. And I definitely have not found that to be the case. So I'm just going to go to my weekly agenda. And again, I pretty much spend the majority of my time probably between planning and my weekly agenda. So I'm going to go back to my favorite view here, which is on deck, and I have a recurring day status. So if I open this up, I know that this is recurring. I know that it's got to happen today, and I can also set a reminder for myself on the day of the event. So that's a status. And I mean, I could say recurring weekly, recurring monthly, but essentially I know that that is like a pinned area that's always going to show up here like this. And I know some other people like to do like a toggle where they could just say recurring tasks with a little toggle. They can click that open and see everything that they need to do. So that works fine for me. And then I just set up new reminders for myself. So again, I know that needs to happen today. Remind on the day of event. And then once that's occurred, so instead of having a task every single week that kind of fills up the database full of tasks, I just make this a single task and I keep resetting the date, and that's just got a day of recurring. That's what works for me. There may be a better or different way of doing it. I do believe that Notion will be bringing in recurring dates. I think don't quote me on that, but I do think that was something that they mentioned. So yeah, I hope that helps. That's how I handle it. I keep it simple. It's just, it lives there and I can always see that. Cyrus said, I have a recurring drop down with 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and then use the date reminder and then reset the date based on the recurring drop down. Yeah. So again, like there's 100 different ways that you could deal with recurring tasks. I actually used to have a little toggle that was separately here. And I think it was like recurring, and I would just it would basically be the same database, but it would just be filtered to show only recurring. And that's something that I've done for other clients too. And then also, again, because most of my time is in my weekly agenda, like I have cardio cabaret every Wednesday. So like that is an item that shows up in my journal. You could also do the same thing where you'd have like build it into your weekly agenda. So it's just like a note to yourself here. It could be like, send invoices January 20th, or something like that. Like, and that way, every time you make a new weekly agenda, that information is always there, and it's just something you can click on or off. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I hope that's helpful. Where did you get the new page icons for your Okie Dokie setup? Great question. A lot of the icons come from Creative Market. I really love their icons. I think it's just simple line icons or something like that. I'll include that in the resources links. Let's see. Saw your para video. You mentioned you copied the database areas and copied and pasted it in the same page. I couldn't do this. I couldn't paste it anywhere. How did you do that? Copy. So to copy a database, what would be the best way? Which page should we go to? I'll go to my weekly agenda to show you how to do this. Okay, so I've got a journal here that is an external, and you have to do this with an external database. So if I copy this, I can copy the link here, or I can just click Command D to duplicate. So Command D, there's the same database. So I can show the same database in like a gallery view if I want to. And you'll see one thing that I've done is the journal that's embedded here is filtered to show the cover art, page cover, and then my general gallery is actually filtered to show the page content. And I always upload like a photo of the day at the top of my entry, and then that way I can have like a nice gallery and I can see what's going on there. And then I can also like tuck this away if I don't want to see it in its full glory. I can actually just move that into the toggle and kind of hide that and show that as needed. Yeah, so I think if you just duplicate the database, it creates a copy of the database. But if you're copying an instance of the database, so you got to make sure that little arrow is there before you duplicate a database. Yeah, I think that's the big, and of course, if you want to paste it elsewhere, you can just copy the link and then hit Command V wherever you want to paste it, in a template somewhere or what have you. I hope that helps clarify. Do you define a task as one single action to be performed like Dave and Alan describes, or something that needs to be done in one work session like Diego Forte describes? Yeah, to me, it's probably somewhere in between. Like, I see tasks as being like usually kind of the smallest unit. Anything that's going to take more than 2 or 3 tasks, like if a task is made up of 2 or 3 kind of action items and it's going to take me a little while, I would lean toward a project. But if I can get it done in less than a day, I'm not gonna turn it into a project. I would just make that into a task and maybe have some subtasks in there. So it's a little bit of David Allen. It's a little bit of Tiago Forte. We do give things a bit of like an agile number. If it's a 1, that I know it's going to take less than an hour or so, and then like a half day. So we won't estimate things down to a granular level. We try and like buffer and give ourselves a bit of time there. So, but yeah, I do try as much as possible to. Tasks are probably like anywhere from an hour to a half day to a day. Because yeah, if it's going to take me less than 15 minutes to do it, I would just do it, and I wouldn't waste time creating a task. That's my philosophy on that. Okay, how to categorize by day. I think we did cover this, but essentially, I just made a day property that is a single select, and I just typed those properties in there. So they're made up, like it's not actually a today property. And then you can very easily drag stuff around. Like that can be a next item, or it can be tomorrow, and you just drag that around, give it a date. So these are not actually based on the dates that are set, which I kind of like. The date is sort of like, this is when I really like want to get this done. And if I finish my today items, then I can look ahead to tomorrow and say, okay, what can I do to make my life a little bit easier? Maybe I could do this today instead of tomorrow. So a number of different ways that I could do that. How you keep track of tasks inside of a task page. So a mini project inside of a project. Tyler, did I answer that already in terms of how I track tasks inside of a task page? Because the thing is, I can embed these tasks inside of a project, and whether I manage them from here or I manage them from the project, if I change the status, it like changes in both places. So in some ways, I almost don't worry too much about where, like, my actions live inside of my weekly planner. They also live inside of my planning dashboard, and they also live inside of that project. They also live inside of sprints. Basically, I'm trying to make it redundant. So no matter where I go, I always see the tasks that I'm responsible for. And I feel like it was, using other tools and systems, it was way too easy for stuff to get buried and for project stuff to get buried. So I've just made it so that it shows up everywhere, and there's kind of no way to escape it. There's no way to say that it wasn't there. Of course, the key is that everything that you're thinking about really should be down on paper to reduce that mental RAM. You're kind of like holding all the things that you should be remembering, get them down, even if they're really small, because then you will really see what you've committed to, right? The only way to kind of, I think, get over that over committing is to really put it all down on paper. Okay, from a client standpoint, I can show you there's a couple different ways of doing this. Client tasks is definitely a whole other beast. So for example, a couple clients here, I've got this client dashboard, and each of these clients has their own master task database. And so here's all the projects that I'm working on with Barbara, and I open this up, and then we have a master task database here. So I can manage this from my own space, or I can kind of jump in and go into her dashboard if I want to. That's a really nice thing that I like, is that I will still see reminders in my space of anything that she assigns to me, but I can always come back to this dashboard and be able to work within here. Is it still an option for jumping on micro video? Oh yeah, did you want to chat that out, Tyler? We could bring you up and kind of workshop it. Hopefully I can help. Let me pull you up on screen. I know that, yeah, anyone managing client and team stuff, there's a whole other set of needs here. Tyler, let me know if you got that invite. I will endeavor to answer your question there, Chris, about what Asana failed to provide me. And just while I'm waiting for Tyler. So yeah, I basically can manage my tasks here in this dashboard.
Hey, Marie.
Oh, hey. Oh,
hey, can't get my camera to work for some reason. But I was curious. So when you have let's say you have a project that was related to a client. So the client is like the top tier of the files, and then it goes to a project, and then you have a task inside of the project. What happens when one of those tasks, what if there's projects inside of projects? So let's say it's a web development project, right? And that's just part of it. So you have branding, you're doing website, you're doing maybe an ad campaign. So the thing I'm running into now is I have a website, but that website needs to be designed. And then that website needs to be designed for both web and mobile. And so those are like, then there's even projects beneath that. And then there's tasks that go into those that are maybe smaller that I don't want to add to my general actions list because they're still related to a specific project. And then so really, how do you manage, like, okay, today I know I need to work on the mobile website designs, but I have 3 tasks that need to be done that are more important than all the other ones. So would you create a whole nother actions kind of Kanban style or Scrum style where those tasks are now ordered for a sprint within a project, like designing a mobile app or a web app? Does that make sense?
I think so, because, okay, in some cases, I totally feel you, because like, yanla.com refresh, like there's like a bazillion moving pieces to that. There's like, projects within projects, there's sales pages, there's marketing campaigns, there's all sorts of stuff in there. I try as much as possible that even if the refresh has multiple projects, I will probably make those into a project, additional projects. But then there are some cases, let me jump in to see if I can share one. Okay, so like a course. She has a course, and then of course there's all of the email marketing that has to go along for that, the planning, the course material, the curriculum, you name it. So we are collaborating on this course as a team. So I actually share this project with the team. I won't show you the whole thing, but can you see this? Yeah, okay. So a bunch of us are in here. So we have like a lot of loose videos, how-to, tasks, like a bunch of stuff that is all happening in here, broken up by type as well. And then we can like comment and mention each other and that sort of thing. And again, this is like a fast-moving, messy project, but in order to have both of her team members who are not necessarily familiar with the nuances of Notion's master task database, I knew I needed a bit more of an organic approach with them, and to like embed videos, like they didn't realize like the toggles had more information in it and stuff like that. So in some cases, I will just adapt my space, knowing like what is the simplest, fastest way that I can get the team up to speed and adding any of their notes in there, knowing that it's not perfect. All those tasks aren't living in my master task database, but I know that this is a priority project. So I might put something in my master task database that's like, half day, like work on the ground up sales page or whatever. And then I can come in here and find everything that I need related to that project. So it does add a little bit of a layer of complication, but I think until I can kind of get the team up to speed with it, there really are like projects within projects for this one specifically. But I do think it depends. Is it yourself that's managing those moving pieces, or are you collaborating with other people for a bit of both?
Sometimes some projects, they're continuing edits for a website where they'll need to jump in and add in, like I'd like them to just add in tasks and then I can review them and then they can get to an area. And I've been using Asana and then just putting them into Notion afterwards for myself. That way, they already know how to use Asana, just leaving it like that. But the main thing is just when I do have some of these like scrappy pages where it's like, I know I just have these tasks to do for this project. But when I'm looking at like trying to stay focused for the day, how do I keep all of them in just one dashboard? It's like, here's all the things you need to do today. You already did your week planning. You did your month planning, your sprints, like not having to focus on, things that are coming up. And knowing that I have everything in order. If I get all these things done in this sprint, I'm on track. That's kind of my dream goal with Notion.
Yeah, no, I can understand what you're getting at, because I have to kind of keep on top of like, what are the tasks with these like 3 moving pieces of these projects. And so as I'm doing the planning inside of like their projects and we're setting things up and we have a call and we're like, organizing things in here, I'll go back into my weekly agenda and I'll be like, okay, I know that I need to add a task for that client. It's like Ianla, right? I can like add a new action for her, and that might be like spend a half day on her project, right? But it's just making sure that I've put it somewhere in my most visible actions database that I know I have set time aside to review those projects. And then I've got my client dashboard here where I can again see that information. Like I know that the course is running from whatever date to whatever date. And then in some cases, we've got like templates for her projects because she launches Crowdcast events every month.
Right.
And so these have a template in here, right? So it's like, send the recording, draft the email announcement, and people's names are already kind of mentioned and ready to go. And I can just add the team onto that when it's ready. And so these are like, loose to-dos, but, and again, part of this is just trying to be flexible with the team. I think the master task database is a little bit intimidating for them, but we do still use it. Like, we do still use it a little bit, and I can assign it to people and stuff like that. But and showing it as a calendar, like a lot of it is like, what's going to help the client see this information and be able to work with it, and what do I need to do to make sure I'm staying on top of all of the moving parts. So even if this task database is just for me, and having this dashboard that I can come back and review, that's I try to, in some ways it might feel like a little bit of extra information or extra effort to like, oh, I have to add a task to my database that also kind of lives in the client's database. The language that I use for my own planning and to-dos is it's more like internal, like, work on Ianla's sales page is it's vague, it's bigger, it's a bigger picture item. But in the actual database here, update terms and conditions. That's the specific task that comes along with that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'll go through and look at all of our master tasks and also the loose tasks and be like, okay, this looks like a day's worth of work. So I need to put that in my little agile planning of like update sales page. That's like a 4 or a 3 or something like that. And so
there's the camera. Because the camera goes on when it wants to.
There, right at the end.
One quick thing. I think a couple of people asked in some of the other office hours about straight from an idea to an action. Can you talk about how when you have an idea? I saw you had those pre-done template pages for each individual client. So if you knew it was a specific task related to Ayanla here, do you just go ahead and you add it there, or do you have a separate inbox that you use first and then you put those into the actions master database, or how does that typically work?
It depends. So like, it depends how actionable that idea, like if that's just a place to brain dump something, I would probably use my notes. That's kind of like whatever random thinking. And then as part of my sort of weekly habit, I try to review those notes. And I do also have that master tag database too. So I try to connect, like if over time I'm seeing like a certain topic is growing and my thoughts are like, connecting together on it, then I might go through those notes that I've made. And actually a lot of my tasks and projects relate to that notes database.
Right.
And so I tend to lean toward notes first versus actions, but that might be different for different people. I know that, like you might want to have a someday maybe projects, right? And then that could be a place that you could quickly add tasks there that always kind of land in the someday maybe. And then you have a routine for yourself where every week you're reviewing the someday maybe tasks.
Yeah. Do you have a process for how you go back and review untagged action items or outcomes, and then or do you start with outcomes, or do you go to projects and then to tasks, or do you have a typical process for reviewing all your information or like task related information in Notion to make things sure things aren't falling behind?
Yeah, I mean, the sprints has been a big part of that. So like, we've got a sprint that's ending on Sunday. So if I make a new sprint here, we like to use plant names or whatever. Then what we do is we pull our backlog, and that pulls everything that has not been assigned a sprint and is not complete. And then together, like we have to talk through this, both Ben and I, and we say like, hey, like this has been on the list since November and it hasn't gotten done. Like, is this still important? And we'll actually kind of ruthlessly go through and delete any tasks that haven't been, that are kind of lagging, and like reprioritize them and ask ourselves if they still matter. So the sprint planning for us has been a way to like really zoom in on that and look at that and just check in with ourselves if that's really important. And then with my notes, so I don't know if, I hope my notes are safe to share.
Yeah, I've had that same issue in trying to like show people my Notion. I'm like, oh no, my document information's popping up.
So here's an example. Like all of these don't have a summary yet. And so what I do is I'll go through and look at the things that don't have a summary, because I know that that means I haven't gone through and processed them and given them an area. So on a weekly basis, I try to go through here. Some are more full than others and have more tags and things like that. But I know that in the last week or so, I haven't really done that. So that's part of my process on the weekend is I'll go through, I'll open something up. Like, let's open up this. Data is beautiful, documented every hour of my life. And so I'll go through, and that's just kind of like a nice, interesting, oh, that's cool, go through, add my thoughts. And then sometimes going through this might trigger an idea for a project, or like my Marie OS, like that's kind of related to that idea. So
yeah, I've started when I do start with a note now when I'm talking to a client, and then I add in the tasks into that note, and then I take and then that's what I've been trying to figure out a way of, do I take the tasks inside of that note directly, or do I add it to, directly to my master base, but then I have to switch back to my notes. Yeah. So a way of, I think maybe a way of Notion integrating, like adding something to a linked database.
But what I like too, though, is that you can actually assign stuff to the task and then not actually leave your note, right? So if you're adding it right from here, you can add your tasks here, jump into it, add additional data, but still be in your notes database.
Oh, that's a great hack. That's yeah.
So awesome. If I go there, I can click on that. I can pull that up, and I never leave here. So it's like,
That's awesome. So I do see a question here that's kind of related to what we were talking about from Edgar. Can you talk about maybe adding those templates for adding a new task for a specific client?
Yeah,
That was
totally.
something I was curious on how you set those up. Did you just do so you just setting the project as that client in one of those new templates?
Yeah, so new template. Let's say
You could do Tyler.
here, Tyler. So Tyler's my client now, and so I'm going to relate that to a project. We'll just pretend that that's part of my Marie OS, and then I can default to that too. Like I can. It's basically you're choosing like what are the default settings for a quick add, and so I know that that's assigned to me. I know that our project is or this task is in progress. You can even default the impact if you want, and effort being low. Day, I also like to default to today, and that way I can always like drag it, but it kind of makes it a priority first.
Gotcha.
I can also, again, choose an area if I want to. I can say that's like consulting and choose the project. I could make it part of a sprint. If I know this is only going to be a 2-week project too, let's attach that to Dandelion Sprint. Okay, great. And then any additional notes, any files, anything like that, I could put there. But this is really an action, not so much a project, right? But so there we go, Tyler. So now two ways I can add that action now. I can either just add it here, Tyler, or I can say, and again, this really depends how you want to organize it. I'm just organizing it by day. But if I have a task today for Tyler, I'm going to open this up and say, click on Tyler. And that's going to new Tyler task. There. And that's all.
Oh, and it imports that information to that page. Oh, that's nice. Just in case if you forgot that that you already have it related. Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. And so I saw you have a lookup for so you put in a project and it automatically put in the client. That seemed really nice to have. So you automatically chase up the chain from a project to the client to the outcome even above that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes I look away and I look back and Ben's like, oh, I like did a roll up on our task numbers or something like that. So like we're both kind of playing with this database and just finding ways to make that stuff a little bit simpler. And Ben kind of does that with his planning as well, where his weekly agenda is hooked up to a month, and then that pulls in the year automatically and things like that. So it's always kind of evolving.
I hate to take all this time, but I see that that last task that you just opened was email follow-ups, and you had it attached to a ton of different projects. And I have this same thing, like I have to do the same task for 8 different clients every single day.
Yep.
So you attach the same one to each client. Do you then go through and have a task list? Like I did it for this person, this person, this person, or?
I mean, I kind of see this as my, and because this is an email follow-up, like those are the clients I have to, email with. So I'll leave this open and I'll open up my email. And this is kind of new since doing our sprints, because Ben was like, you have this, like our master task database is getting full with all these like same tasks. Is that really helpful? And I thought, right, doing the email follow-ups might take me 15 minutes and I could, talk to a bunch of people at the same time. So it kind of makes sense to group those together and simplify that. And also kind of encourages you to do that batch planning, right?
Yeah. The batch planning. So do you start off your week? Do you do it on a Sunday, a Monday, and then work through your sprint? Or do you work through weekly, daily? Maybe that could be something people are interested in.
Yeah, totally. It's like, again, I spend most of my time in the weekly agenda. And so at the end of the week, so at the beginning of the week, I'm like, what's my priority? What's the project focus, goals, and the month? That's like how I kickstart the week. And then toward the end of the week, I start filling out the gratitude, the highs, wins, and whatever. So it's like there's a beginning of the week process and an end of the week process. And so I will look through my journal too, and like look at all the things that were done. I have to be a little bit careful about like I think I hid some of this here, but my wins, losses, like what I want to do better, and I use that information to like I journal about it. I kind of do a bit of a free form thing, and then I fill out the database, and that way I can look at the database view and see all of in a week or in a month or in a year, I can see all of the highs and lows, the wins, the losses. So yeah, I do spend most of my time in here, and even the journal, like I can add my journal right in here and never need to even leave, right? Like I can just say like new Wednesday, and that pops up, and I just update this filter by date.
And you have templates for creating new agendas, new weekly views. Do you siphon it off? Like, so you just like, so you can look in the past and be like, what was my sprint for January 6th through 12th?
Oh yeah. Yep. Like in my planning here, I can look at all of
Awesome.
those
Yeah.
quarterly goals and see my themes, and look at that, made a pretty major overhaul to my weekly agenda. Like I can see all the content that I produced. Yeah, it's like I don't necessarily know which of these are safe to share, but it's like here's all the content from my content calendar that I produced in that month or in that quarter, really. The months that make up that quarter, my goal, you know, and I've got some like loose stuff below. And I mean, like again, everyone's brain works a bit differently, but I find like if I don't put the intention down and I don't have projects that support it, then it's just never going to happen, because like my default is like la la la, go with the flow for everything. So I force this stuff on me so that I really follow through on it, and that's what works for me. And I just love that Notion allows you to put that structure. Like I know for some people they might find it a bit frustrating, like it's so open-ended, but I'm like, that means I can do anything. I can like force myself to look at things in a certain way, and I find that really helpful.
So this is kind of a question for like people who are on teams, or maybe they're extra small teams, but you guys are both Notion experts, you and your husband, which is like kind of an interesting dilemma. So who gets to make what changes, and how do you update each other when you are changing a system that's so core? Because
I love it you asked that.
Yeah, I'm on 2 boards, and one of them is like, older generation that it's a hard time using Slack. So I'm like trying to figure out a way to pull them on that Notion. And I want to create some Notion experts within the group that aren't just me, and giving them capabilities to change, and helping them work through and build their own system that works for the entire group. But I'm trying to figure out what is the appropriate way for sharing updates that you guys do to each other, to the system. What's kind of your process there?
So, I mean, we definitely have like stepped on each other's toes where I'm like, did you delete my relation to my journal? Like, why would you do that? So that definitely has happened in the past. And because now we're both like, that's why we went through this whole kind of reorg here, and we really simplified this, because Ben wasn't using this at all. And I was like, well, it's not helpful if this isn't useful for you too. So we had to strip out my personal stuff. So this became the shared workspace. And then it's like, then I can go do my journal and goal setting and whatever in my own private space without it, like him seeing every update, or my virtual assistant seeing stuff that she doesn't need to see. So we did have to go through this and agree on this. And it was, Ben's suggestion, for example, to kind of work out these sprints and what the process for that would look like. So, I think in the sprints is also when we agree, like, oh, there's a whole bunch of fields we're not really using. Should we delete that? Is that going to impact anything that you've been doing? So that's the first part of your question, is like, we have agreed, do not be deleting any fields in our shared databases until we talk to each other. That's definitely key. And then I think the other piece of what you're saying in terms of working with a team, and like, this is something I definitely feel like I have to do this with my own clients, is that I know that I'm an advanced user, and I know that I'm like bending Notion in ways that maybe it wasn't designed to be done. And that's what I like to do with my projects. But for my clients, like many of them are not very tech savvy. So even though I had all these like fancy templates ready to go, they're not going to be useful if that client isn't able or willing to use them or doesn't understand. So more and more, the more people that I work with, I've started creating templates that are like geared at getting a team up and running quickly. And it includes a lot of documentational language in there, how-tos, call outs, things like that. Like there has to be a little bit of an onboarding process. And I think even potentially like a training session where it's like, hey team, here's what I've created as a starting point, and I want to show you how this works. And like, okay, so Ben is a volunteer firefighter, and those guys are older and they are not tech savvy, but he has managed to get the volunteer firefighters on
Oh, wow.
on Notion, like their roster, their training event. Like if Ben can get the Half Moon Bay firefighters into Notion and have this be a place that they can use and understand, I feel like anything is possible. But it does mean you might need to strip back some of the ways you've been doing things and simplify it and kind of bring people in a little bit slowly. It is a real challenge for sure. So I think the simpler that you can make it, I would even say like use less databases unless it's something like a roster where it's a table, right? It's like a super simple spreadsheet. I would default to just keeping the information as simple as possible, not over engineering it, and including a lot of language like this, like welcome, welcome to the Half Moon Bay, and all like questions or feedback.
How do you use this dashboard? Yeah, the first thing I've been trying to think of is just get them on Notion signed in, and then creating like, before you touch anything, please read this. And there's
a great site. Here, I'm going to share this link with you. The Owl Brain. I send this to everyone. I'm going to put this in the chat sidebar. Any teams that are just getting up and started, I send them to that page. And maybe I can share that.
That's awesome.
I'll probably share that just so you guys have a little bit more context for what I'm sharing.
Yeah, and I noticed that you guys have the resource set up to be a Notion page for this, which is awesome for people to check out. The resource document is the green button under the video for everyone wondering.
Yeah, we're trying to get into more of a habit that, because I mean, so many questions and great links come up in this process. So after each and every office hours, we're trying to associate a document with that where we can paste any of those items after the fact. So I think this is so great. It's like they've publicly shared their brain, right? It's like the guide to the brain. What do we do? The 90-second version. And like these pages are super simple. Like they're like Google Docs. There's really nothing there. A couple simple links. Who does what?
Yeah, that's a big one.
So I think doing some kind of team home like this is a really great first step. And as much as I love doing my task management in Notion, I think that's a way more advanced use case. If you are just getting a team up and running, I think using it as your central brain is like the best first step, because people are like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And then you can like brand it with their icons and, just make it look really inviting and appealing. And then once they get more comfortable maneuvering, moving through the pages and logging in, then I would maybe start layering in some of those other like, hey, here's the projects that we're working on.
Yeah.
But that does take a bit of time. And I think getting people in slowly in this kind of way is going to be a lot more helpful.
Definitely. Yeah, I saw a few. I'm just looking at some of the questions just to make sure I'm not like running over people and trying to get some of theirs in too. And one of them talking about finances and expenses and basically budget planning. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I saw something with Kai He. I don't know how to pronounce his name yet. I don't think he's ever said it.
K.
K. Yeah. K-I.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you're watching this, I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name. Love all his YouTube videos as well on Notion. But I saw something about him in finance. Are you guys doing a Notion finance coming up? Are you allowed to talk about it?
No, I mean, I've also been following kind of what he's been doing. Like I know he's like does a lot of stuff around investing dashboards and things like that. So like I don't do a lot of my own financial stuff inside of Notion other than our bookkeeping. Right. But I'm super curious, like to hear from another Notion master who is storing that stuff inside of Notion. I'm super curious about that.
Gotcha.
See, okay. I don't know what's happening there.
Yeah. Maybe I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. But
no.
Subjects real quick. Someone was talking about doing templates for the same database entry that you'd have over and over again. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to do that?
Templates
like
for the same?
An already formatted database entry. So like, let's say it's a task and you already know you've done this task before in the past and you want to keep all those same properties and duplicate it. Would you just search for that task you've done in the past and then hit duplicate, or is there a way to do a template button for that?
But isn't that the same? That's the template button that that I showed you, like how I created the Tyler template.
I guess, yeah, I guess that does make sense.
Yeah,
Maybe his
that's how I
question was
would.
already answered then.
Yeah,
All right,
I
well, that's
think
all from me. I can't. That was amazing.
but it's great. It's great questions, right? Like it's hard to know sometimes. I think it's really helpful to have someone on to ask some of these questions too, and to like chat through it, because I know there's so many nuances, especially with the team side of things. And so I think I feel like even like team task management or like client task management could even be a whole other office hours. So
Yeah.
so maybe we would maybe we can plan one of those in the future.
Yeah, I think that would be super valuable. I mean, how many people are on the polls here for a team? So
Let's
only
see
8,
here.
but that's
Okay, not a.
yeah, a lot of
Let's
solo.
see. Yeah, a lot of solo personal. Yeah, interesting. There's definitely room to have you know, more of these conversations in the future. So if you want to see anything specific, if you want me to tailor certain sessions, what we're trying to do is alternate. So that every other week we bring on an expert. Like Mike Vardy is coming on next week from the Productivityist, and he's only just kind of getting started with Notion too. So it'll be cool to kind of hear his philosophies as a productivity expert. And then we're trying every other week to have a bit more of the how-to, or kind of diving into the specifics of a particular topic. So if you know there's something specific that you want to see covered in more detail, definitely reach out and ask us, put it in the chat window, because we want these sessions to be as useful as possible for you. So yeah, definitely put that in the chat and we'll factor that into our future planning.
Perfect.
So
I'm
yeah,
gonna
thanks
jump
so
off
much,
here.
Tyler, for
Thanks,
your awesome
Gary.
questions. Yeah, cheers. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I know we've we've definitely gone over. Thank you for those of you who have kind of stayed this long. Awesome. Yeah, I do think the conversations are really powerful for um, just getting some of that nitty gritty. Solo, but okay, Mark, trying to pull your wife in. Mark, you got to figure out what does your wife love? Does she love plants? Does she love cooking? Start pulling in some of those really fun templates to show her, because Ben was super hesitant because we were on Asana for years and I had to build Notion in a way that I could prove to Ben that it did what we needed it to do. And so I had to get buy-in. And I think that's what a lot of us have to do if we're collaborating, is that we do need to get a bit of buy-in. So find something that your wife loves and show her how awesome it can be, and have a bit of fun with it. So thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Again, don't hesitate to, to put any future topic ideas or things that you want me to cover in the chat window, and we will definitely cover that. And again, keep an eye on the resource document. I'm going to go through and mention anything that kind of came up, or any templates or questions. I'm going to yeah, get that document updated. So check back later this afternoon. And until then, join us next week with Mike Vardy from the Productivity. I'm super excited to chat with him. You can always click on that Notion icon in the top and register for future events. These are also always uploaded to YouTube after the fact on Notion's YouTube channel. So have a wonderful weekend. Have fun playing in Notion, and we will see you next week.